Hello and welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, the creator and founder of Genetic Insights and the author of the Rejuvenate Blueprint, Elwin Robinson. And as always, thank you, lovely listeners. We have such a beautiful community. We love having you with us every week, and we're so grateful that you're here. And today's episode, I know I'm curious about this one because Elwin and I were just discussing it. And when he brought it up, I was like, yes, we should do that. So have you ever been curious about the advice that you're taking from a certain individual and then actually seeing the evidence for their progression? Well, today, that's what we're going to do. So Elwin said, hey, why don't we do this episode where we look at my test results? And I said, I would be so interested in that because I'm always curious to see where somebody started, where they are now, how they've progressed, what they've done, and the changes that it's made to them, especially in their health tests. So, Elwin, I want to kick it over to you. Why did you feel it was important to do this today?
Yeah, good question. I am also curious to see other people's when they post them on like social media. And I was thinking about doing it myself, but I was like, my results like, we'll see pages and pages and pages and pages. I feel like if I upload it to social media, it's going to get lost. And so I thought actually a video, probably a shorter episode than usual. I think we're planning to just go through the test results and show them to you. Yeah, I think it is a good idea to see the results that someone has. Not that I claim to be perfect or I claim to be an image of perfection. We'll go through it very honestly, obviously, full transparency. We're not going to censor anything or leave anything out. But to see, as you said, progression, Chrissy, I think I've been quite honest that back not that long ago, like in end of 2019, I really struggling with my health, and well into late 2021, early 2022, I was still really, really struggling. And I've talked a lot about that on mainly other people's podcasts, to be honest, about discovering what was going on and stuff like that. But I'm still doing experiments all the time. We recently, I think we'll have that episode that I filmed before this one, Chrissy, where we talk about the experiment with Jacob's protocol. And so I thought, let's actually share my test results, and I hope it encourages other people to, first of all, do these tests if they can possibly afford it, or some kind of maybe more affordable version if they can't, but to just track to see what's going on, because the alternative health community is full of people making all kinds of claims with very little to back it up. And I'm kind of sick of that a little bit. So I wanted to be honest with where I'm coming from. Now, I'm not perfect. As I said, I was struggling a lot with health before. Very brief background on me. Both my parents had, not very good genetics, very bad health issues. My mother died reasonably young. And, I was a vegetarian for the first 35 years of my life. I never had meat. I was actually a vegan between 0 and 4, and then 27 and 35. And so, I did develop certain nutritional deficiencies. I talked about that in a recent video as well. And, I smoked heavily between 13 and 27. I used drugs quite heavily between 14 and 27. I did not look after my diet or anything, my health at all, up until my late 20s. And then my attempts to be healthy were largely like going into veganism and stuff, which perhaps was beneficial in some ways because it's like it does cut out a bunch of toxic stuff, but it also potentially can create other problems. And so I'm hardly a model of how to do things, but I also feel like the interpretation of these tests is quite key. So there's this guy I think everyone in our community's heard of called Brian Johnson. He has a Netflix documentary as well now, and his goal is to not die. And he's an entrepreneur who started a company called Braintree that ended up being bought out by PayPal, and so he's rich basically, and he's dedicated his riches to discovering the keys to longevity. Which, to be fair, compared to what most people spend their money, most rich people spend their money on, and I think is a very good experiment to do and to share with the world. And I think there's a business behind it these days. He's selling supplements and tests and all the rest, but yeah, why not? But I but I saw his test results, and they were interpreted in a way to make him seem as if he was doing incredibly well. But I was looking at some of the results, and I was like, so it's like this top 1%, this top 0.1%. But I'm like, that's not even desirable, let alone top 1%. Like the fact that his core body temperature was like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but like below 35 degrees centigrade or
I would have thought
uh,
that's a definite no.
it's undesirable. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's the most obvious one to kind of our community, but there was quite a few of them actually. And I don't want to do a whole episode on picking his thing apart because, I'm not a hater or whatever. But it just made me realize that actually getting clarity on what is optimal is really important. And we have done episodes on that before. We did a bunch of Dr. Miriam where we talked about how to interpret your test results and to know what's actually optimal rather than just okay. So I'm going to give my take on it. And if I know we have a bunch of other practitioners watching, if you disagree about my interpretations of any of this, feel free to tell me. I'm open to it. I tend to go through my test results with Dr. Miriam. In fact, I just did that today, which is what made me think of doing this episode today. Actually, Chrissy, I didn't mention that. And yeah, she was happy. She feels like it's progress again, which is good. The other thing, just before we get into it, for disclosure, so the experiments I've been running recently, I mentioned one of them with a previous episode with Jacob, where I talk about his protocol. So I've been doing Jacob's protocol, which he calls the Holy Grail, a bit, and I'd been doing it not that much, just like I don't know, maybe half a dozen times, certainly less than 10 days before I did these tests. So I'd only done it a little bit. I'd also been doing something called the Perrin technique, which is kind of a lymphatic drainage thing to help, especially clear toxicity out of the brain and the central nervous system. I've been doing that for just over a month when I got these test results done. And I've been doing something called deuterium depleted water, which we'll do an episode on that in future. I think I touched on it a little bit recently in the Q&A episode. So, and I did that because when I last did mitochondrial test results, which was a while ago now, so we won't go through those today. In fact, I think we went through them in a episode. I can't remember. Anyway, we won't do those today. But they were not good. They were not good. I think I've mentioned that several times. And so I've been looking at different things to improve mitochondrial health because a lot of other more obvious stuff wasn't didn't seem to be the problem. So I was like, oh, maybe it's excess deuterium. Actually, I tested deuterium. There's literally just one marker, so without a reference range. So I'll just tell you guys. I tested my deuterium, and it was 140 parts per million.
Where does that
And
fall
it,
on the scale? I have no idea.
yeah, exactly. There was no reference range given with it, so I called them up and asked them about it, and they said, well, so basically, so deuterium. I guess we're gonna have to explain this then. So deuterium is a type of hydrogen which is heavy, and so it kind of is a bottleneck. It blocks the mitochondrial energy producing process to some degree, and so um, if you're in a climate that's closer to the equator and closer to sea level, excuse me, then the water around you, whether it's rivers, lakes, rain, whatever, springs, tends to be higher, and so the normal deuterium level near the equator and near sea level is about 145, 150, something like that. And then if you were like really, really high up, like maybe top of Mount Everest, or really, really north, like Greenland or something like that, then your deuterium level might be like maybe 125. So it sounds like it's not that much of a difference, but because basically water is part of all life and then deuterium is part of all water, a relatively small variation in your deuterium will create quite a big impact. It's because it's like, let's say if 150 is typical where you are, then going from 150 to 140 sounds like it's just a little bit of difference, but it's actually like, significantly less than average. So significantly less of an energy bottleneck than average. So I got my test results back. It said that I was 140. When I spoke to them about it, they said normally like between 140 and 150 is what we see with people who are are not healthy, who have illnesses and stuff like that, and then maybe 130 to 140 is more healthy people. And so I was right in the middle according to that. So I said, fair enough. And it's probably worth, trying it and doing some deuterium depleted water, see if I can maybe get to 135, which is more the middle of healthy at least. So yeah, that was I actually wasn't expected to talk about that, but I'll put it out there.
Little sidetrack. It's all good.
A little sidetrack. If people are interested more in that, we'll definitely do a full episode on it. But I've been enjoying that. I like the taste of the water. I feel good after drinking the water. So I don't know how much of a difference that's making. According to them, they said I probably, with the type and amount that I've been doing, it might change by like 1 point every 2 weeks probably. So it's not going to make a massive difference. But maybe it would explain why I feel a little bit better. Again, a little bit, even a small change can make a big change in how you feel, depending on where you kind of are. Like the weakest link thing that we talked about many times before. If deuterium was my weakest link, then even a small decrease could potentially make me feel a lot better because it's a weakest link, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely think we should do an episode on it because I know deuterium depleted water, things like that. But there's also the hydrogen water out there. So that's also linked with deuterium. So yes, we'll put that on the list for sure.
The impact of sunlight and carbohydrates and all of that stuff. Yeah. So we'll get into that. But let's talk about our normal test results that a normal person is more likely to be able to have access to, because that was some testing in Hungary. I don't even know if that's available in the US where a lot of our viewers are. So I think first we'll go through my medical results. Yeah, so this is from a company, Medichecks, which is probably the most mainstream one in the UK, I think, for private lab testing. And I don't know if I like everything about Medichecks, but one thing I do like is this user interface. It's very easy to kind of see your previous test results and compare them to your current ones. There's another company called Thriver, which also does that very well, I think, but Thriver's got quite a limited amount of different things that it tests, whereas Medichecks has got a pretty broad range of standard medical tests that are available to the public.
Right. And is that Thriver with TH, Thrive like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good guess. Thank you. I know I don't pronounce my THs properly. So let's get into it, I guess. So red blood cells first.
Yeah. So is this, so on Medichecks, if somebody wanted to repeat the same test, is this just like a massive overhaul? Does it have yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Ultimate performance blood test. Okay, great.
Yes. These are £200. I think they're cheaper than the US a bit to get roughly similar markers. There are some things that are more common in the US that you tend to not get here and vice versa. But in the US, you can get pretty similar stuff for a reasonably similar price, $300-400, something like that.
Yeah, and this test requires a blood draw. So you would either have to go in someplace or have someone come and do a blood draw for you, right?
Absolutely, yeah, venous draw. That's mainly for the red and white blood cells, which are the first two categories here. The rest you can usually get without, but I like to do the full thing. So we can see, so these have tended to be out of range for me. These are one of my weak points, the red blood cells, for reasons that no practitioner has really been able to fully explain. So the hemoglobin is the body's oxygen carrying capacity, and this has tended to be either high or mid-range since I've been testing, since 2019.
Oh, I can see. So right here. So for those of you that are on audio only, underneath where his newest test score is, there are those your previous tests from? Is that January?
Yeah,
2019, and this has been consistent for so you do it every year.
No, just random.
Oh, okay.
You can see 2019, 2018, 2019, and the next one is 2022.
Oh, I see.
But, I use different companies
in between
as well.
Okay.
In different times. So, yeah, it's
pretty
random.
Yeah, this is a nice feature because I've never seen that before on a platform where it actually is graphing your previous tests that you've done through that company of this test. So that's actually really nice.
Yeah, like I said, Thriver does that too, to be fair to them. And I really like their user interface, but they just have way less testing available, unfortunately. But yes, I agree, it's good. And I don't know of any US company actually that does this.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Not that I know of. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Brian Johnson's one will do. As I know he's starting to get into the testing game. Okay, so yeah, so but Dr. Miriam has basically said that when the hemoglobin's good, she kind of ignores the rest of this. But just to be fair, I'll just show you the rest of it. So hematocrit, um, space or volume within blood, kind of fine.
Yeah, you're well
Red
within range there. Yeah, 0.439. That's good.
The red cell count at one point had been low, which can indicate anemia, but that was back, I guess, before I started eating meat. So that's been consistent. Now, these three, MCV, MCH, and MCHC, have consistently been out of range most of the time.
Oh,
You can see
above.
that here.
Yeah.
Mean corpuscular volume. So meaning that the red blood cells are a bit big is the simple way of putting that. And generally, as you can see here, from a mainstream perspective, what does that mean? It's called macrocytic anemia. It tends to be because of B12 or folate deficiency, but I don't have B12 or folate deficiency. It also tends to relate to hypothyroidism, which I do have. And so that's probably the answer to that. And when we get to thyroid, we'll talk more about that. But this one's the only one that's still out of range right now. It's kind of just out of range. All of these are at a level, though, that any medical doctor says, they're not worried. But I still don't love it. I think it's a sign of something going on. It could be thyroid, but I also think it might be a result of damage from lead and maybe also copper, that just makes those red blood cells not work quite as well, and be slightly deformed, like a little bit too big. This one's varied a lot. So yeah, that's kind of, it. Most common reason for it is nutrient deficiencies, but as we'll see when we get to that, that's not what it is for me. So that kind of leads hypothyroidism, as they say, and then also I think toxicity. I've got high lead in my blood, and we'll show you that in the next test. So I'll go straight to the next one unless you have any questions, Christy, because I know we've got a lot to cover.
No, not at all.
So white blood cells, this is, low end of fine. So again, this is kind of typical if a person either doesn't have an infection or has recently had an infection. This issue of the lymphocytes being low is kind of newish. I guess I had it a couple of times before as well, but it's kind of definitely lower than before. Again, Dr. Miriam's not worried about it, but I don't love it. I think it says it can happen after infection. I don't really think I've had an infection. I honestly don't know what this is. So if
Right.
any practitioners want to point it out, the only thing I can guess is because I've been doing the lymphatic drainage, um, which I mentioned at the beginning, that maybe this affects the lymphocytes, because the lymphocytes are obviously created in the lymph, hence their name. So maybe the fact that we've been flooding my lymph system with more toxins from my brain has affected the level of lymphocytes. But that's just a guess. I honestly don't know. Now, this one's of interest as well, eosinophils. So this is one that Dr. Miriam says ideally should be 0. So even though it's mid-range and it would be easy to skip over it and say it's fine.
Yeah, you're at 0.2 right now, and she's saying 0 is what it should be. Okay.
Yeah. So it's mid-range because it's like 0 to 0.4 is the range. But it often correlates with allergies, as it says here, meaning that you have allergic symptoms when you have it raised. And it can be caused by parasitic infections. One of the reasons why I did this retest is because I did a parasite cleanse with ivermectin, fenbendazole, high doses, actually for the first time ever. And I wanted to see if it made any difference to the eosinophils, and it did not. So either those were not the right antiparasitics, or that's not the problem. So, there could be other things that raise it. There's definitely genetics can be. I've got a few clients who have a genetic tendencies to high eosinophils, and then it's raised. But even then, sometimes there's a parasite component to it. So, yeah, I'm at a bit of a loss with this one as well, to be honest. But it's, nothing to worry about. But I do have those histamine tendencies. There are like a few things that will set me off. not in any major way. I've never had an EpiPen or even antihistamines, to be honest. But like freshly cut grass will like bother me, for instance. I think overall I'm improved in this regard, and I guess you can see it. Like it
Yeah,
was quite
definitely.
raised.
There was,
Yeah.
back in 2022, you were definitely off the chart there.
And in fact, I only started in 2019. But like, for instance, I used to have a cat hair allergy, which is why we bought hairless cats. And now the house is full of hairy cats, and they don't bother me at all. So most allergies have got better. So that's nice. But still not quite on top of that yet. And I'm open to any input from our viewers and listeners. And that's probably it, I think, in terms of white blood cells, of things that are worth commenting on.
Yeah, so there's only a couple categories, like you said there, that are out, like your lymphocytes and your eosinophils.
Yeah, the only one that's really out is the lymphocytes, but the eosinophils are not optimal, I would agree. Yeah. And even the lymphocytes, I don't know if it's really an issue. I can see it's been low a couple of times before. As it said, it's usually just a sign that you've had a recent infection. So it could, I'm not aware of having a recent infection, but it could be one that I didn't even notice, I guess. So clotting status, this one's quite a good one. So this platelet count was pretty high at one point, which, I guess it's certainly going to stop you from like bleeding
Yeah.
excessively. It's perhaps a problem, but when I've talked about this with Dr. Miriam, she says that because this MPV is so low, the mean platelet volume, that then the fact that the count is high is fine. So that's her perspective of it. And actually, her perspective is that the mean platelet volume is a great indicator of chronic inflammation, better than some of the other things like
CRP or things like
C-
that.
exactly, yeah. And so she wants that to be exactly where it is. In fact, I think she said it's the best she's ever seen.
Well, that's great. So you're right there at a 7, which is right on the cusp.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. So that's nice. So that's generally I have no signs of chronic inflammation by many, many different metrics. So I guess that's the good thing. The platelet count, I don't know if this high level is when I was mega dosing vitamin K2. So I don't know if that just raised it excessively. I'd say it's possible because vitamin K2 does lead to more platelet formation. So next, kidney health. So this is a bit of a interesting one because this is a calculation based on creatinine, and creatinine can be raised by creatine. I remember I did this last test after I'd eaten in the morning. I didn't fast, and I have creatine in my breakfast, so
Right.
that always raises it a bit. It's been low before, and I don't remember why it was low, to be honest. So we've talked about this before, and because it's unreliable when you take creatine, I did do a test called cystatin C with a different company. Medichecks doesn't actually offer it, which is supposed to be a better kidney marker, and that kidney marker was mid-range. So ideally, I would want that creatinine to be lower, and I'd want the EGFR to be higher. But because I take creatine, I'm not bothered that it is the level it's at.
Genetic Insights provides cutting-edge, affordable DNA testing, giving you access to over 500 health reports that can help you in 3 key ways. They may be able to resolve your existing health challenges even when nothing else has worked. Using simple lifestyle changes, their reports can help you reduce your risk of developing future health challenges that you may be genetically predisposed to. And they can help you feel more confident in your health by showing you where you are genetically strong. Unlike most other genetic health testing companies, Genetic Insights tests over 83 million different variations in your genes, guaranteeing 99.7% accuracy across all of their DNA reports. They cover almost every aspect of health, including digestive issues, cardiovascular health, weight loss, hormonal and blood sugar balance, as well as nutrient needs, allergies and intolerances, and so much more. Using their system is quick and easy, and reading the reports is simple. If you've done an Ancestry DNA test, you can simply download your raw DNA data, upload it to the Genetic Insights platform, and within a few hours you will have access to genetic reports which give you a risk score for each specific issue and scientifically validated recommendations based on your individual genetic profile. Everything in your reports are based on scientific studies, and there are citation links throughout every report. If you are serious about optimizing your health and wellness and feeling great, then getting access to your genetic insights reports may be the most important health investment you will ever make. In the reports, not only will you gain insights into how to overcome existing health challenges and avoid future issues, you'll also discover which types of dietary, lifestyle, and even supplement protocols are best for your unique genetics. To get your unique genetic health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and use code Rejuvenate to get 20% off today. That's geneticinsights.co using coupon code Rejuvenate to get 20% off today. Okay, and then let me ask you this, because I believe for this test, Medichecks says you don't have to fast, but would you recommend fasting?
Um, yeah, it depends what you're trying to achieve. Like for some markers, it matters more than other. Like cholesterol, all the cholesterol markers will definitely change a little bit if you've eaten. What else? Thyroid, adrenals, like cortisol will tend to be lower after you've eaten than before. There's a few things like that. So, but honestly, I'm not that bothered about it. The more important thing is to make sure you don't like have any biotin, B7, for a few days before, because it will just mess with the results. Um, and there's no fasting insulin in this one. There's just A1C, so that's not a reason you should fast. So yeah, I'm actually not bothered. I do
Okay.
either. Yeah, personally. So kidney health, okay, not great, but just okay, I would say, based on again doing that test with another company. But again, this is okay even by normal standards.
And
Mid-range
just
creatinine.
quickly, what is EGFR?
Estimated glomerular filtration rate. So it's just based on the creatinine. Based on the creatinine, they estimate how well your kidneys are filtering. That's what it is. And so, like I said, cystatin C is a better marker for that because it's not affected by. Well, it's not just taking creatine. Like if you've just exercised, your body breaks down your muscles, and that can raise it. There's a few things that can kind of raise it artificially. It's just cheap. So let's see if it actually says it here. Dehydration. Yeah, there you go. Elevated levels may also be found in individuals taking creatine supplements and engaging in vigorous exercise. So that's why I don't love it as a marker, but it's included. If it were low, then I would do a separate test and make sure there wasn't a real problem. Then we have liver health, and I think consistently with all of these have always been in range. To be honest, that's not saying a huge amount because usually a person's liver has to be pretty bad before these start to actually be raised, or sometimes it happens with an acute infection. But you can see with all of mine that they're well in range and pretty close to optimal from the markers that Dr. Miriam has shared with us. So not much to say about liver really. The proteins, so albumin is an interesting one because Dr. Miriam, oh no, that's what it was. Yeah. Dr. Miriam recently talked about how she likes this to be high because it kind of shows that the person has good reserves of nutrition. And I was saying mine was really high, which it was. Yeah, so what it was, when I did it in December, a month before, I had eaten beforehand. When I did this test in January, I hadn't eaten beforehand.
Right.
So the albumin dropped by a few points. That's what it was. But yeah, I said to her, I'd never paid any attention to albumin. So when she said that, I thought, oh, that's interesting. So mine was probably artificially raised a bit because I'd eaten beforehand. It's probably just, mid-range. Globulin, I don't really pay much attention to. It's actually lower than it's ever been, but
Yeah,
it's
I
still
can see it's
mid-range.
decreasing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if that means anything. Really, just because it's only mid-range, I wouldn't really worry about it. SHBG, now this is an interesting one. So sex hormone binding globulin, this was consistently high for a very long time, which meant that even though my testosterone was also high, although it's fluctuated a lot, we'll see, it the free testosterone wasn't that high because a lot of it was being bound by SHBG. Then when I was looking into it, I think a lot of men have done this. They've kind of had a test that said they had high SHBG and then Googled or put in YouTube or something, how do I lower SHBG? And I put it in YouTube and I found a bunch of videos saying don't. That it's actually, there's a lot of protective effects of it, that there's nothing really bad about it. But I wasn't really satisfied with that. So I talked to a bunch of practitioners about it. and it seemed that high SHBG, they said, kind of correlated more with blood sugar issues. And I would say that's accurate because I think I had a lot more like hypoglycemic symptoms during this period. And that's been resolved for a while now. And as it's been resolved, the SHBG came down to a normal level. It's just mid range.
That's really, really interesting. So, okay. So that is something to pay attention to for someone, especially if they're like, "Ooh, why is that high?" Then they should really look at their blood sugar. Good.
Yeah, I would say so. Again, it's not listed here in their kind of list of standard medical stuff, but that was the thing that made a difference for me. So if your HBG is consistently high, the fasting glucose and A1C, which is the next one here actually, are not always the most helpful. But if you do a fasting insulin as well, then that gives you a good picture of what's going on for your blood sugar. And by the time I tested that about a year ago, I kind of had already resolved it, and they were all good. So this is the diabetes portion. In England, we just have this HbA1c a lot of the time. They don't do fasting glucose as often here as they do in the US. We can see this has been consistently kind of mid-range, which is where you want it. Nowhere near diabetes, so there's not really much to say about that.
It's interesting with this reference range because, and I can't recall what, like when you do the CGMs and those kind of things, if it's the same units of measure, because like I would have thought 30 would be high, considering when I look at my CGM, it's usually around, for you 5 or 5 point something.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not the same reference range.
Yeah, I
think
didn't think so.
7 is equivalent to 42 in the
Gotcha.
one that you just said.
Right.
Something like that. I had a chart with it on, but I don't know where it is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something like that. So yeah, definitely a different reference range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's looking really good. So, and you can see, it's been okay. Around the
Yeah,
same.
the whole time, because that's an average. So
Right.
so this really only tells you if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic. It doesn't tell you the fluctuations, unfortunately, because it's just an average of the last several months. So it's kind of the least interesting blood sugar marker to me. But
Which one's your most favorite?
fasting insulin.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the most early predictor of potential issues. And of course, it's the most expensive and hard to get, unfortunately, but it is the one that's, the most worth doing.
And you can get that in the HOMA IR as well, right?
Well, HOMA IR is just a calculation that is fasting insulin and fasting blood sugar, and then applied to an equation.
Right. Okay.
So yes, if you have HOMA IR results, you must have had fasting insulin in order to get them. Yeah. Then I'll move on to cholesterol status. So in the UK, we have a bunch of them here. Sometimes, like I think Thriver recently added like a lipoprotein A and B, so I got that tested with them as well, and they were in healthy ranges too. But this is kind of more the standard ones. So total cholesterol is high, but I'm happy with that. So this idea that cholesterol is bad, actually people with cholesterol at the high end consistently like have better health outcomes overall. Now, you don't want it to be maybe 10 or 15, because then that could be a sign that there is inflammation and irritation of your arteries and blood vessels, and your body's trying to protect it with cholesterol. But cholesterol is a protective action. Now, the only problem with high cholesterol potentially is that not enough of it is being converted into the other steroid hormones that are made out of cholesterol, like pregnenolone, then DHEA, progesterone, testosterone, etc. All those things are made out of cholesterol. So I'm never concerned about cholesterol being in the top of the range. I'm actually happy with that. But it could just be a sign that not enough is being converted to other hormones. That would be my only concern of it. So you can see here in the past, at some point, it was even, what was the highest it's been, 6.7. Even that, I wouldn't really worry about it, except for as a sign that not enough of it is being converted to the other essential hormones.
Right.
Even vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is also made out of cholesterol. So in itself, I don't believe it's a problem if it's high. In fact, it's shown to be good and protective, but it is, and it's also a sign of hypothyroidism. Back in the day, before they even discovered a TSH test or any of these other tests, high cholesterol was an indicator. And despite being on thyroid hormone, there are still a few indicators in my test that shows that I have a little bit of hypothyroidism. We already talked about the red blood cells earlier, how there was signs of macrocytic anemia, which can be caused by hypothyroidism. And now we have this as well, that the cholesterol is still, a bit high. And the LDL cholesterol, same, a bit high, which can be an indicator of hypothyroidism.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because cholesterol, I know they used to sort of demonize it in the past, but they're really finding out other things now to that's switching the train of thought. Correct?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
it's protective. I
yeah.
mean, again, beyond a certain level of highness, it is a indicator of a problem, but it's not a problem, it's an indicator of a problem, I think is really the accurate way of looking at it. So my HDL cholesterol is not super high. It's always been, fine, I guess. As high as 2. The last one was 1.57. But so the triglycerides, there is this school of thought that says HDL cholesterol in relation to triglycerides is kind of the key heart health measurement. And with that, even though my HDL is not super high, my triglycerides are so low that I'm still well within the healthy range. You can see there was a bit higher when I did it a month ago in December. It was 0.77, and this latest one is 0.33. But again, that's the difference between eating and not eating.
Right, right, right. So yeah, you fasted this time. Yeah.
Yeah, when you eat before, your body absolutely makes more triglycerides in the blood. That's just what it does to the food you've just eaten. So triglycerides would be one of those tests where eating makes a significant difference. And if your triglycerides are actually, worryingly high, then
In a fasted state, especially.
yeah, but I'm saying if they were worryingly high and you hadn't fasted, then you would want to make sure you fast next time to see if that's what it is, rather than panicking about it. But yes, if your triglycerides are high in a fasted state, that would be an indicator of, potentially an early sign of cardiovascular risk of disease, definitely. Okay, and inflammation. This has always been, I think, very low, the HSCRP. Oh, except for once. I think I was doing some detox thing or something. And that's why that went up from a vague memory. But yeah, except for that one time in March 2023 when it was 1, it's always been like below about 0.5. And recently it was 0.2, which is,
That's really good.
might be the lowest it's ever been. No, it's been that low couple of times before, but anyway, yeah, very low. Next, gout risk. So this is an interesting one, uric acid. I talked about this recently in the episode with Jacob, where I said that's one of the reasons I was drawn to learning about his formula, because he has this theory, which I think is his theory, that your body uses uric acid to transport copper out of the body. And so I was like, I wonder if, because I'd actually had uric acid levels that were low consistently, quite a few times. You can see it here back in 22, 24. It was below the reference range. Even other times, it was often close to the bottom of the reference range. And generally, like if you look here, it's low levels of uric acid are not concerning or not cause harm. So, like, very low levels are rare, but could be genetic disorder, kidney issues. But basically, the level low the level low levels of uric acid of the level that I've always had, they think is totally fine, um, like any medical professional. But by Jacob's theory, I wonder if it is potentially a sign that my uric acid levels are actually depleted by excreting copper. It's possible. Uric acid is actually a powerful antioxidant in the body. So uric acid in the medical profession, they usually think of it as a problem because if too much of it builds up, then it creates gout, can create these crystals that build up, especially in the toes usually. They're
Yeah.
very painful.
Why does that happen?
Why do excess levels when they build up? Why does it happen to the toes specifically?
Yeah, I
I mean,
guess, yeah. Why, firstly, why does it happen? And why in the toe? You would be like, why is it? Yeah, yeah, strange. Or is it, gravity and bad circulation and flow?
yeah, because there's the least circulation to your toes than probably any other part of your body. So it's where things are most likely to build up. Um, and why do things build up when they're excessive? I think usually gout is part of a picture of atherosclerosis and insulin resistance and being overweight and metabolic syndrome. It's like it's a picture of someone who basically has circulation issues, and so yeah, the uric acid just is not cleared away fast enough. It starts building up more and more, and this thing that was once protective now becomes a problem. I think, that's as much as I understand it. So yeah, and so this level was higher, but this is after I'd been doing massively high doses of molybdenum. And molybdenum is something that potentially raises uric acid. Although I've also seen studies that show that molybdenum can be protective against too high levels of uric acid. So it could be more just that molybdenum is normalizing or optimizing uric acid. But the enzyme that converts pure ions, which are something that there are high levels of in meat, especially red meat, into uric acid. I can't remember the name of the enzyme, but anyway, there's something in you that converts these animal food, especially red meat derivatives, into uric acid, and that is sped up and made to work better by molybdenum. So I believe me having those mega doses of molybdenum is why that shot up within the course of a month.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, well, would somebody that is suffering with gout, would they want to take molybdenum, or would they want to stay away from
Well, as I
it?
said, from the kind of conventional perspective, no, because it would raise it. But actually, I've seen studies where it's the opposite, where high molybdenum is protective against gout. So I guess the truth is, I don't know for sure. It would be a risk to do it, certainly. But if you were desperate, nothing else is working, it might actually be an experiment to do it. Like if I had gout, I might also try it. I might try, say, 500 micrograms and do a before and after uric acid test, because you don't have to go to a company like Medichecks these days of uric acid. You can get a at-home 30-second finger prick test, just like you can for blood glucose. So because it's so easy to test, you could just try it. Test it. Okay, it's high. Take some molybdenum. Wait a few hours. Test it again. Has it gone down? Right. That would be a possibility. Although, of course, I would do it with low dose, because if it has the opposite effect than you want, you don't want to take a high dose. So that's uric acid, iron status. So my iron has always been consistently mid-range to high, but my ferritin, which is meant to indicate your reserves of iron, has always been consistently low to mid-ish range. But this range here up to 518, this is not a healthy range. This is like hemochromatosis, is probably even before 518. So it kind of depends a little bit who you listen to, but you can definitely have excess iron. So most people agree that certainly above 200 is not good. Some people would even say above 100, 120 is not good. So arguably, I'm kind of at a level now which is probably close to optimal with ferritin, where I have some reserves, but not a lot. And that's probably what you want, because excess iron is a free radical that prematurely ages you. There are certain schools of thought. I'll try and get someone on who believes this at some point, who believe that excess iron is like the root cause of all disease. Some people believe that. And there's something to it. I mean, Jacob, who was on recently, I guess would be in that category, that he believed that excess of copper and iron was the root cause of a lot of disease. So I guess we've already had someone on who believes it. But yeah, so I'm not worried about the ferritin being at that level. I'm happy with it. I was a bit concerned when it was so low. Let's see, what's the lowest it's ever been? 50. I suppose even 50 is okay. Yours has been a lot lower, Chrissy, right? Like 20 or
Yeah, I
30.
think even less. I think at one point it was like 14 or something.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So if mine was that low, I definitely would be concerned, and that's why I did advise iron supplementation for you. Um, but I would, yeah, even 40 is, I kind of feel like okay. So yeah, this has never been an area where it's a problem. If anything, I'm kind of glad I'm taking products like lactoferrin and EGCG, which kind of chelate iron and stop it getting too high. Because you can see there's a bit of a trend of it going up in the last year or so. So I wouldn't want that to just carry on as I'm eating more and more red meat. In terms of all the other iron markers, generally not really worried about those, so long as the iron and the ferritin are good. But so yeah, I think we can skip them. Vitamins, we can just briefly look at that. So, as we said, my macrocytic anemia, the slightly too big red blood cells that we saw at the beginning, the number one cause that usually, by any mainstream medical perspective, is folate or B12 deficiency, which is why they actually test folate and B12. I mean, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the main reasons because it relates to a type of anemia. And you can see folate has been consistently mid-ish range, which I think is fine. And then the B12 is generally been way higher because supplements tend to have like massively high amounts of it. I'd actually been taking it easy on B vitamins for a while, which is why it's come back into a vaguely normal range, but it's still high.
And why did you decide to come back down a little bit on your B vitamins?
Well, partly because I'm doing Jacob's protocol, which just it revises B5, B6, and B7. Plus, I do add in B1, B2, and B3. But I just hadn't been doing the B12 and folate because it's always consistently fine, and not only in this test but also in the NutriVal. So it just didn't, if I don't need it, I'm not going to take it.
And let me ask you this: if somebody is supplementing with B vitamins and they're about to do a test like this, should they stop for a few days prior, or should they carry on?
That's a good question. Depends if you want to see the results based on what do they look like when I supplement or what do they look like when I don't supplement, which I know maybe sounds like a silly answer, but the point being, if you're trying to get them up, let's say they were low last time. I had a client a little while ago who had, low levels of B12, like really low, and I was worried about it because it could be serious, as we talked about in a recent episode. Like, I would say to that person, actually, the first time, test it, when you've taken it the day before, because we want to see if the supplementation is even getting to the blood. We want to see if it's working at all. But yeah, if your previous result had been like, above the scale, which is like I had quite a few times, then you can make an argument that you should stop and not take it for a while to see what your levels are. Because actually if you hadn't been supplementing with B12, this would be something that they would send you to a hematologist for. Like, there might be something wrong with your spleen. But of course, they extremely rarely do because they know that everyone's taking B12 supplements, and that's almost always what it is. But yeah, like when you get the instructions for the test, it tells you to stop for a while so that you can see, so that it doesn't skew it.
In an ideal world, you'd meet all of your nutritional needs in the form of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and more from the foods you eat. However, unless you prepare all of your food at home from scratch using the highest quality ingredients possible, the reality is that most of us need some nutritional support. Most of us need to take supplements if we want to look, feel, and perform at our best on a consistent daily basis. And this is especially true if you have genes that give you an elevated need of certain nutrients. And this is where Feel Younger can help. What I love about Feel Younger is that they offer a huge range of quality supplements and healthcare products formulated and endorsed by Elwin Robinson, including must-haves like magnesium glycinate and vitamins B12, D3, and K2. And they do it at affordable prices with free shipping for orders over $50 without ever compromising on quality, purity, or potency. To learn more about how Feel Younger supplements can give your health a boost while supporting this podcast, please visit feelyounger.net and use promo code Rejuvenate to get 20% off your first order. That's promo code Rejuvenate for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. Yeah, because I know, like this one, it definitely says stop biotin, but it doesn't say anything else about certain other things.
I think it does say stop B12 these days.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It definitely says biotin because it interferes with the test. With the B12, it tells you to stop as well, but I think it's just for this reason because it looks so high. But I don't think there's a good reason to stop if you don't want to. And then the D. So this is one. Like, I have been trying to get my D levels up. I guess there's another experiment I've been doing that I didn't mention. I've been doing it for a year. I've been trying to get my D levels up without any D supplementation, just by using UVB light. Now, honestly, I have not been consistent with the UVB light like over the course of a year, but I was consistent with it for this month. And the levels actually went down over the course of a month. They went from 64 to 55 nanomoles, which in US units, I think this is like 20 or 22, something like that.
Yeah, it's quite low.
It is low, yeah. So I finally given up and I started supplementing some vitamin D. I know that the advocates who are against it would say, no, don't, it's fine that this marker is low and all the rest of it. But I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to try and get it like high like it was before. I'll be happy when it's just at, maybe 70, 90, something like that. I'm not going to, but yeah, it's too low now. And I wonder if that might actually be why one of those white blood cells were a little bit low, lymphocytes maybe, and
Right, because
stuff like that.
yeah, because your vitamin D is low, so then it's going to have a knock-on effect potentially on those as well.
Exactly, potentially, yeah. It's certainly not a certainty, but yeah. So, and I haven't had any infections. I haven't had any, well, other than possibly like SIBO type symptoms occasionally, but I haven't had any normal infections. Like I haven't had a cold or whatever in a long time. But still, just to prevent it, I am going back to supplementing it. So that experiment failed. Just did not work. Okay, so thyroid. So I take sustained release T3, and so normally when someone takes sustained release, and I was fasting with this test, but I did take the T3 in the morning still, because sometimes people don't, but I did. And it's quite surprising, despite taking the T3, my T3 is not that high, and even more surprisingly, my TSH is pretty high. So usually when someone takes high doses of T3, their TSH is suppressed, like it's bottom of the reference range. And the T4 is suppressed because the body doesn't make much T4 because there's plenty of T3 floating around. So this is quite unusual, and it basically indicates that I actually need more T3.
Wow. Because the TSH is not, is because it's where it's at. And then, yeah.
Because the TSH is still high, and because the T3 isn't even that high, even though I've just taken it.
Right.
So it's a bit of a mystery. I'm open to people's input on that. My belief on it is that there is probably because you can't even blame the liver or the gut or whatever, because the liver and the gut is what converts the T4 to T3. But this is a case of someone actually taking T3. And it's still not showing as very high. So it kind of indicates that my body wants more T3. I guess that's the simple way of doing it, because there's certainly no excess floating around in the blood, right?
Right.
Because if you could say if it's not getting into the cells, then TSH would be raised, but then the T3 would be raised too, because it's not getting to the cells, it's staying in the blood, right? But that's not the case because it's not even high in the blood. So it just seems like my body wants more T3. That's the only conclusion that Dr. Miriam and I could come to about it. But again, if you're a practitioner with a different explanation, I'd be interested to hear it. And then other hormones. Okay, so yeah, I don't think I've talked about this, but so the reason why the FSH and luteinizing hormone are... Oh, actually, sorry, we didn't look at the history of the TSH.
Oh, no, we didn't.
Did we?
No. Oh,
Let's do
wow.
that first.
Sorry, yeah. So you were off the charts earlier in your TSH. You've had quite a ride.
Yeah, so the TSH, you can see the first time in 2018, it was 6.5. This is hypothyroidism, even from a mainstream medical perspective in almost every country in the world. So this is one of those things. I'm not one of these people who's like just taking some thyroid because I heard about it from Ray Pete or whatever. I'm someone who actually had hypothyroidism probably for a very long time. And I wasn't just trying to optimize. I really actually needed it, which again would explain why, even when I'm taking some, it isn't necessarily enough. And so it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Often when you up your dose, your body then, your TSH does go down, and that happened for a period of time. You can see here. But overall, yeah, my body, the TSH has a tendency to be high, even when I'm taking thyroid medication. I think I started taking it probably here, 2022. So you can see it was elevated, and the TSH actually went higher even, telling me I wanted more. And then, then it went down when I upped my dose, but then my body got used to it and it went back up again. So it has been a bit of a roller coaster of like when I first up the dose, the TSH goes down, but then after a while it goes back up again.
And if somebody And thank you for showing that progression through it. If somebody's TSH was really low, like super low, like down to, yeah, that 0.27 that's down there, what would that indicate? Or
Are
even
they on?
less?
Are they taking thyroid hormone or not?
No.
Then it can indicate hyperthyroidism.
Okay.
Yeah. Fairly unusual, right? It's way less common than hypo, but it does happen, obviously. Um, but we'll see what it says here. What might a low result mean? Overactive thyroid, yeah.
Okay. All right. And would somebody have an overactive thyroid potentially before it goes underactive?
It's possible, especially in the case of Hashimoto's, yes.
Okay.
If you have autoimmunity, what happens is your immune system starts attacking and destroying your thyroid gland, and then it kind of goes up and down because when your immune system is destroyed, a part of the thyroid gland, a bunch of thyroid hormone gets released into the circulation, which then suppresses TSH. But then when that kind of wave is dissipated, then now the thyroid is smaller and less able to produce thyroid hormone, so then the TSH can actually go up, and then it kind of goes in cycles like that. So that's my understanding, is if a person's not taking any thyroid hormone,
Mm-hmm.
and they're having those big fluctuations, that it's Hashimoto's is the most likely
Right.
culprit.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's go to sex hormones. So I think we'll start with testosterone in this case. So this is a bit skewed because of that one reading, but other than that, well, all right, let me just explain that one. So basically, I've got
Yes,
like a
please,
reading
Elwin.
of.
Explain. There's a nice for those that are here on audio. It's everything's really consistent, and then a very high spike that makes this nice. What do you want to call it? Like a triangle.
It's actually not that consistent, but it looks it
It just,
compared to
yeah.
this. It's just completely skewed everything else. So basically, this is where I did a finger prick test, and so this is what I wanted to talk about. So starting about a year ago, I started doing low doses of topical testosterone. And so low doses is about 25 milligrams. Um, so based on the absorption rate of topical, it's usually about 2.5 to 5 milligrams of testosterone a day, which is it's low. It's below the lowest that any kind of TRT clinic would normally give you. So then the follow-up question would be, well, why are you bothering the no one if it's so low? So the reason I started doing it is because my DHT levels were low. And we've talked a lot about DHT, right, in previous episodes. DHT is the real masculine hormone. And so there was this situation, which you can see even here, it was red, Chrissy. So it was like above the reference range several times. Um, and I was not taking it then. As I said, I started in, when did I start? Actually, it hasn't even been a year. I started in July. Yeah, I started in July 2024. So yeah, which is where you see that spike, but in August. So all this time when it was high here. So this is UK, like for Americans listening. So ours isn't like up to 900. Ours is up to 29. So mine, like in 2022, it was 25. In 2023, it was as high as 29.6. So it's like high. But my free testosterone wasn't that high because my SHBG was raised before, as we talked about earlier. It was like mid-ish range for a while, like in 2022. Then as my SHBG started getting better, even my free testosterone got high. So we can see in March 2023, my free testosterone was right at the top of the reference range. My testosterone was right at the top of the reference range. And yet I still didn't really feel high testosterone, right? And that's what made me look into DHT. And actually, I have my DHT results here. So can you see those as well?
Yeah.
So this is a separate test. So you can see when I first tested that, this was only March, less than a year ago, it was 1.3, which was like right at the bottom of this reference range. And the reference range is really low, so it's terrible, basically. And so because of that, I tried a lot of things to raise DHT, including, my herbal formulas and stuff. And I tested those with different company, annoyingly, so I can't show you all of those. But basically, it made like a 10 or 20% difference, which was something. But I was like, you know what? Because my starting point was so terrible, I want to actually try and raise it. So then I tried using actual topical DHT, and that was like March, and that didn't actually raise my DHT that much. Again, I tested it with a separate company. It raised it a bit more than the herbs, but it actually didn't even raise it like that much. I think it went up to, I don't know, 1.6 or something. So it started at 1.1. When I tried the herbs, 1.3. When I tried the herbs and stuff, I remember it went up to like maybe 1.4. But then when I used topical DHT, it only went up to 1.6. And so I started researching. I was like, and it also suppressed testosterone when I was taking the DHT. So that's not that it went terribly low, but you can see it went down to like 18, whereas before it was like more like 25-ish. And so I was like, damn it, what can I do? And and eventually I decided, you know what? And oh yeah, that was it. So I researched it, and eventually I saw that people who were doing, so generally in the TRT community, there's this belief that the superior type of TRT is injectable, right? That's what almost everyone does. That's what almost all the clinics and doctors recommend. But when I really dug into this, one of the reasons for it is because less of the testosterone is converted into other things, especially estrogen, but also DHT. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I don't need testosterone. I want DHT. I wonder if I take a little bit of topical testosterone, will it convert it into DHT? And the answer was actually yes. So first of all, I tried like 50 milligrams, and that was, again, I tested that with a different company, but my DHT was like 10. It was like so high, and it was actually too high. You don't want your testosterone, sorry, you don't want your DHT to be too high in relation to testosterone.
What will happen?
You actually become too relaxed. You become too sedated. DHT is such a powerful GABA agonist that it actually will like suppress the function of the adrenal glands. All this happened during a period where I didn't do a Medichecks test, and none of those reports are very user-friendly. So I'm just kind of telling the story rather than actually showing you in this case. But I went through all that and worked all that out and decided, okay. And so I scaled back to just 25 milligrams of the topical testosterone, which seems to be just enough to bring the DHT up to a reasonable level. You can see this was tested, less than 2 months ago, 2.4. Ideally, I'd want to have it a bit higher, but I don't want to take any more exogenous hormones than I want. And then the other thing is, my understanding of DHT is it upregulates 5-alpha reductase, which is that enzyme that converts testosterone to DHT. So my plan is to wean off the testosterone. The next thing I'll do is I'll go down from 25 to 12.5, and hopefully I'll maintain like at least a reasonable level of DHT, because that enzyme that converts testosterone to DHT has been upregulated by the presence of DHT. Does that make sense? I hope I've explained that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll probably have to listen back to really get it, but
a lot of things downregulate. That's the point. When you take them, your body makes less. There's a big exception to that is 5-AR, 5-alpha reductase, which converts testosterone to DHT, and 5-alpha reductase also converts something into oxytocin. And so, interestingly, when you artificially raise your DHT or you artificially raise your oxytocin, it upregulates the thing that makes more of itself. Do you understand that?
yeah, interesting that it would
So
do
then
that.
when you stop taking it, instead of having lower than before, you still have higher than before, because it's upregulated the thing that makes more of itself.
Okay.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my theory as to why I'll wean myself off it and hopefully keep the high DHT. That's
Yeah,
another
so you're gonna have to-
ongoing experiment.
You're going to have to come back and let everybody know the results.
Yes, how that's actually worked. And so yeah, and why was it so high that one time? That it's 10 times the reference rate of testosterone. It's because I did a prick blood test, and I had forgotten that I put some of the testosterone cream on my hands.
Whoops.
So obviously it just showed up really. I mean, look, I didn't obviously I washed my hands and stuff beforehand, but I
Yeah.
think you've got to go like 6 weeks without having touched your hand without it skewing
Oh,
the results.
wow.
So now when I put the cream on, I pump it onto my wrist and do it like that, and I never touch it with my hands so that it doesn't affect test results. So that's why the FSH and the LH, which are kind of the pituitary hormones that tell your body to make testosterone, are a little bit low, a little bit below the reference range, because I'm taking a little bit of testosterone. So it just downregulates the thing that tells your body to make more, if that makes sense. One of the other things that I'm happy about as well with the level I'm taking is I also did a sperm test. And the conventional thinking is that with TRT, it suppresses sperm production unless you take HCG and stuff, and clomiphene. But with the level of testosterone I'm doing, it's enough to give me high levels of testosterone, high levels of free testosterone, moderate levels of DHT, high enough, and yet it has not reduced sperm production. My sperm production, sperm motility, and all those things were high according to the test as well. So I kind of really feel like I found a sweet spot where I get all the benefits with none of the drawback.
Right.
And speaking of none of the drawback, one of the other problems with testosterone, and especially one of the potential problems with topical testosterone, is that your body can convert it into estrogen. Now, this is a bit of a case of where you apply it, because basically fatty tissues will convert more testosterone to estrogen. So this is one reason you wouldn't want to put topical testosterone in, say on your belly, if you have a fat belly, because more of it will be converted to estrogen. But we can see that's not an issue. My estrogen actually started off really high. You can see it's right at the top of the reference range when I tested it in 2019. And it's now right at the bottom of the reference range. It went down significantly even the last month. So you can see the reference range for those listening is 40 to 160. Even a month before 2 months ago, 1 month before I did the last test, it was 76, and the last time it's 46. So it's right at the bottom of the reference range. It's actually so low, I don't want it to go any lower because there are problems with low estrogen. And so, I don't know. I guess I'll see. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Hopefully it will stabilize at that level. But I do think this is probably because of the protocol, because of Jacob's protocol that I was doing. The high levels of zinc do suppress the conversion of testosterone to estrogen.
And how much, when you say high levels, what are we talking about?
I'm doing like 100 milligrams at a time
Okay.
plus.
All right. Right.
Yeah. Don't do that in isolation. Check out that episode if you want to attempt that test, and be careful. So that I'm pretty happy with. I'm happy that, as I said, sperm production is still normal despite the FSH and LH being a little bit low, a little bit suppressed. What else? Oh yeah, prolactin, the bane of my hormonal existence. I've talked about this quite a lot. So I think I finally worked out what's going on with the prolactin. So let's have a look at this. So we can see it's consistently been high. It started off above the reference range back all the way in 2018. Sometimes it's kind of gone to mid-range at best, but it's often
it's
shot up.
very fluctuating. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So all right. So I've found out through, and you can see the second to last time I did it, it was probably the best it's ever been, or close to best it's ever been. Kind of mid-range. And so I think there's a couple of things for this. First of all, I think vitamin B6 and zinc do lower prolactin, and I'd avoided vitamin B6 for a long time. And I'm doing high doses again now as part of that protocol. But honestly, I got that lower result before I even start the protocol, so that's not what it is. But I think potentially that's why mine is generally high. But the specific factors that I think make mine high is, so I tend to have like a hot bath at night. I've talked about this before. I do a CO2 bath with a bunch of minerals and stuff. I sweat several liters of sweat because I'm trying to detoxify heavy metals, and that is the safest way of doing it. Right. So I've been doing that for years. And A hot bath significantly raises prolactin. This is what I've discovered. So a hot bath significantly raises prolactin. And the other thing that significantly raises prolactin is when you do this test as soon as you've woken up. So for like this one, for instance, where it was really high, this is where someone arrived at my house. I rolled out of bed, went downstairs, and let them take my blood. Um, whereas if I, whereas normal people, that's not their, even if they're doing it fasting or whatever, like maybe they wake up at 7 a.m. and then they're at the clinic at 9 and get their blood drawn. So those couple of hours of being awake will significantly bring the prolactin down. So in this case, where I did this test a month before, where it was mid-range, two factors. I had the blood drawn 2 or 3 hours after I woke up, and I didn't do a hot bath the night before. And then with this one that I did recently, where it's at the top of the reference range but not above it, I did it a couple of hours after I woke up, and I did do a hot bath the day before. So I'm like, okay, so those are the factors. If I do a hot bath the night before, it basically doubles the result. And then if I have the blood drawn, like, let's say half an hour after waking up, then it doubles the result. So that seems to be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm partial to a nice hot bath as well, but I mean, is there a reason why you wouldn't maybe do it because of the prolactin, or is it okay? I mean, like, is it going to raise it too much?
It's a good question. Everything has benefits and drawbacks. So if you look at, the mainstream medical thing about what causes it, let's see. Yeah, it says it can suppress testosterone, cause loss of libido and erectile dysfunction. It's totally not the case for me in terms of testosterone, right? That's proven. It was high even, years before I was taking it. So none of that really applied to me. Let's see. Yeah, no, it doesn't really say anything useful there. The usual thing, what can raise prolactin? It is still low thyroid, so that's another potential thing for me. But stress and intense exercise, they say as well. And so basically, they talk about the benefits of saunas, and they talk about these heat shock proteins, right? So and also growth hormone is significantly stimulated by, a hot. And again, when I say hot bath, I'm saying pretty, very hot. Like I usually have it about 45 degrees centigrade, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. I don't know, like pretty hot. And that's why I sweat so much, because it is pretty hot, and usually about 3 liters. Based on weighing myself before and after. And so it's a stress on the body when it's that hot. I guess that's what I'm saying, Chrissy.
Right. Okay.
And so is that stress good for you? Potentially, yes, but it will raise prolactin. Is it a problem that it raises prolactin? It can be, especially if you have an issue with focus. So prolactin will antagonize dopamine. And so dopamine is, the thing that gives you motivation and focus and energy and enthusiasm and all the rest of it. So it really depends on your experience. If you're feeling a bit depressed, if you're feeling a bit lacking in enthusiasm, if you're feeling like it's hard to focus, then yeah, like a hot bath may be contributing to that, honestly, by elevating prolactin. So that's, there's a lot of things, especially when they're extreme, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold or extreme exercise or whatever, that have both benefits and drawbacks, and this is a hot bath is an example of something that does have both.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a good. I liked hearing that that the prolactin is an antagonist to dopamine. So if you really aren't feeling motivated or for it, then you may want to skip the hot bath and allow yourself to kind of recapitulate a little bit.
Yeah. And the same with the other stuff, right? Overtraining. People famously become demotivated after overtraining. People famously become demotivated after too much stress, So these are all things that raise, and of course, people who are hyperthyroid are often lacking in motivation. So these are all things that can raise prolactin. So I still do it because I have provably high levels of toxic metals in my blood, although they are getting better. We'll see that in the next test. But there's maybe a case to be made if you don't have any provably high levels of toxins that you're trying to get rid of, then maybe you do it every other night instead of every night or something like that,
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good facts.
Okay, then we'll get to this one. So these are adrenal hormones, DHEA to cortisol. As we've talked about before, you want a good ratio of one to the other. A high ratio of cortisol to DHEA is good predictor of lots of health problems, and potentially an early death and all kinds of stuff, reduce longevity. So this is quite an important one. So if we look at both of mine historically, um, we can see cortisol's kind of been a bit up and down. I think kind of makes sense based on all kinds of circumstantial factors. But DHEA has been kind of consistently low most of the time, low to maybe mid-range at best. Um, and so I decided for the last 6 months or so, I've been taking 50 milligrams of DHEA in the morning, because I felt like the DHEA overall was too low. And the number one reason normally that people are concerned with taking DHEA at that level, like Dr. Platt, I know, said it. I'm pretty sure Ray Pete said it. I'm pretty sure Dr. Miriam said it. That DHEA can convert to estrogen, right? So that's one reason not to have too much as a supplement. Well, look at my estrogen. Should I be worried about that? No. So I'm like, I'm just going to go for it with the DHEA. So this one, where it's above the reference range, is basically just where I took it in the morning and then had a test a couple of hours later. So that was kind of artificially raised because I just took it. But other than that, you can see even, when I've been having it every day, but just not on that morning, it's still not even mid-range. So for whatever reason, and I actually don't know the reason, my body has low levels of DHEA. That's not great. It's a youthful hormone. It's related to mental clarity. It's anabolic. There's quite a lot of good things to say about DHEA, as long as it's not excessive. And mine tends to be low. So I've been supplementing with it, as I said, people like Ray Pete recommend, and I like it. I think I feel better with it. I think I feel, more energy. It's subtle, but I'm happy to supplement it. And with cortisol, it's kind of all over the place. I think, it depends a lot again on how soon after you wake up you do the test. So, if, like in this case, remember I said that, like, when my prolactin is really high, it's because I basically rolled out of bed and someone drew my blood straight away.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure that was the same time, right? Like, it was right at the top of the reference range for the same reason. I'd just woken up, basically. And so a couple of hours after waking up, your cortisol should have dropped a lot. In this case, you can see the cortisol was very low because not only had I been awake for a couple of hours, but I'd also eaten.
Right.
So then as you've eaten, your cortisol gets low. So there's a lot of variation in cortisol based on whether you've eaten or not, how soon after you've woken up you do it. With me. Now, obviously, I've seen some clients that no matter what variable goes on, their cortisol is really high. Well, that indicates then, their adrenals are really overactive, right? But if you are like me, where you kind of see a lot of variation, sometimes it's right at the bottom, sometimes it's right at the top, then often you'll find that's more kind of circumstantial, like I was just saying.
Okay. And this test, because it's within the Medichecks and it's from the blood, this is because I know in the past I've done a diurnal saliva for my cortisol. So how would you, like, if you wanted to test your cortisol, like where would I see like how this test compares to the saliva test? Or are they two totally separate things to be able to really check where your cortisol's at?
They're pretty separate. I mean, if you want to check where your cortisol's at, you should do it soon after waking up. And so that's one argument for doing the saliva one, is because a lot of people, just in terms of practicality, they can't arrange a blood draw within an hour of waking up. A lot of people wake up 6, 7 in the morning. You're not going to be able to get a blood draw usually at 6 or 7 in the morning. So that's that. So I mean, I know Dr. Miriam prefers the saliva cortisol. I know a bunch of people do. It's common in the functional medicine world. I'm a bit skeptical of it. Like, I think Dr. Platt's argument is quite compelling that, when adrenaline is raised, it will reduce the level of cortisol in the saliva, like, and it will make it look as if the cortisol's too low, but really what the issue is the adrenaline is too high. Anecdotally, I've seen with people where their saliva cortisol, like, seems to be low, but I just can't actually believe that their adrenaline was low based on how they are. So I don't know. I still prefer the blood one, honestly. I'm
Okay.
in the minority in that regard, but I realize practicality wise, a lot of people just can't do it. So therefore, the saliva would still be helpful. And the blood one, look, it's still helpful in many cases because let's say a lot of people they don't manage to do it until 2 or 3 hours after they wake up, but then I see it and they're still right at the top of the reference range. I'm like, well, that's definitely telling me your cortisol is high. So it's kind of like it being low if you've taken it several hours after waking up doesn't is not conclusive, but it being high several hours after you've woken up is pretty conclusive to me.
Right. Okay. Good. 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 Good to know the difference.
And then lastly, I mean, this is not really anything, just thyroid antibodies. This basically just says I don't have Hashimoto's. It's well within the range often. So a bit of an anticlimax for the last thing there. um, and we've been going for ages, actually, Chrissy. So I think we should leave it there, right? Lots of great questions from you. I hope that was interesting to the viewer or listener. I do have a whole NutrIval test result to share. So if you enjoyed that, please, and you want more, please tell us, and I'll share my NutrIval results with you. I could even share my mitochondrial results with you, but I'll only do it if you leave me some comments on YouTube telling me you want to. So let me know.
Please leave them in the comments. I like to go over this stuff. No, I mean, for me, I like this because it's also, I get to compare because otherwise I'm really just looking at mine or my family's or my mom's or my dad's as she sends stuff through. But it's great to go over stuff like this. And I know when you did the episode with Dr. Miriam, really going over like, this is what this stands for. This is what this is about. That was very helpful because otherwise, people just look at these lists and go, okay, it's in the range, next. So it's really nice to dial in and see. And also to see where other people are at as well, because it gives you a base of understanding a little bit more. So no, this is very good for me. I'm very curious. I always like to study and research and do all of that. So thank you for that. But before we close, Elwin, and again, also too, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your results as well. So that's also very nice and very helpful. But are there any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Chrissy. And the other thing I want to emphasize is this is why one size fits all solutions just don't work. People are just so different. You can see things that apply to me may well not apply to you for various reasons, right? Maybe you don't have high prolactin, but you also don't have high testosterone naturally, right? So or maybe your estrogen is high, maybe this or that, maybe your thyroid is fine. So that's why different interventions, different supplements, different everything work differently for different people. Like it's so important to clarify, your own individual, I don't know, fingerprint or whatever you want to call it, and to not do these one size fits all solutions because there are, there's a small minority of things that are almost universally beneficial, admittedly, but the vast majority of things are just so context dependent. And that's really why I don't know. I don't know if these test episodes actually are super popular, honestly, compared to they're not. But the reason why I carry on doing anyway, and and Chrissy does, other than that we enjoy it, is because we're trying to hammer that home to anyone who's even vaguely willing to listen to test. Now, tests are not 100% reliable. They're not, as you said, the reference ranges are not 100% reliable. There's sometimes a matter of opinion as to which is. So it's also not an exact science, but it's so much better than the classic thing I see in the health technology, which is, oh, I found this latest guru, I read this latest book, I heard this latest webinar, and they said to do this, or I found this latest sales page of this whatever, and they said to do this, and that it's great, and so therefore I'm going to do it. It works for some people just through luck, or I guess strong intuition, or whatever has led them to the right thing. But there's such a large majority of people that's not working for. Obviously, we talk a lot about the bad health outcomes in terms of the chronic disease epidemic, in terms of like the mainstream and normal people, what it means. And, obviously it means that the normal medical approach isn't working. But it also says a little bit about the alternative approach that is also not working, right? If if the mainstream medical approach was the thing not working, but the kind of one size fits all diets and one size fits all exercise regimes were working, then I would say probably a significant percentage of the population would be healthy, way more than there actually is. The problem is that not only does the mainstream medical approach fail a lot of people, but the what I call mainstream alternative health approach also fails a lot of people a lot of the time. And that's because we are so biochemically all individual. And so that's why I started the genetic testing and more importantly, reporting company. And so we've done episodes on that, but it's, genetics are always the starting place for me because there's such a vast array of information that you can have available with a very non-invasive test at a very low price. But to get into it more specifically with all the a snapshot of what's going on, whether it's the blood, the urine, the saliva, or whatever, is just super, super helpful as well.
Well said. And I also too, I love it because as we're going over these kind of tests, I get more familiar with what they mean and understand them a little bit more each time we do. So again, thank you for that. And listeners, lovely listeners, please make sure, if you liked us, let us know in the comments. If you want more, let us know that too. And as always, thank you for joining us. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed that, I recommend watching our latest episode, which you can do by clicking above. And make sure to subscribe, like the video, comment, and share with anyone who you think might appreciate it. Thank you.